get started. And there are a couple of new faces, I think, who are with us here tonight. So just real quickly, thank you for joining from Catherine and me. I'm Brenda Andreessen. This is Catherine Haskins. We formed the Bridge Club to help people connect, engage, learn, and grow. So we're really excited to bring forth some really interesting conversations. And as Catherine's been reminding everybody, we really love to see faces. That's one of the reasons we use the Zoom platform, because when we can see each other's faces, we connect with each other in a way that you just can't do when you are on the telephone or sending text messages to each other. So thank you. And I want to say, Pat, thank you very much for turning on your camera, because I know you hate to do it. So I really want to give a shout out to you and appreciate it. So, okay, feel free as we go along to ask questions. David's going to have a couple of opportunities within where he actually stops to ask for questions. But if you have a comment or a question, raise your hand, put something in the chat, and we'll call you out. So without further ado, we are going to introduce Dr. David Haworth. He is a longtime advocate of the importance of the opportunity to give good care to all pets, regardless of income, regardless of your own particular perspectives on how a pet should be treated. So we were really excited when he agreed to come talk with us about what access to care really means and how we can have that be beneficial to the veterinary profession. So it's a really powerful conversation. Appreciate all of you being here. And David, I'd like to turn this over to you and kick us off with our traditional toast.
I will do that. I want to make sure you guys, because we were joking beforehand, this kind of looks like a Motel 6 behind me, but actually I'm in a really nice room that overlooks the Mississippi River. I've got to just show everybody, because you can't.
Not pretty. That's gorgeous.
Nice.
Very nice.
Okay. So
now that we know you're above a Motel 6, we can carry on.
Well, clearly I had something to prove. That there's some insecurity in me that needed to prove to everybody that I was in a really nice hotel. So thank you guys. First of all, I love what you're doing with the Bridge. I think this is a fabulous thing that this profession really needs, both individually but also collectively. We all need somebody, some place that's safe that we can come and talk about stuff that's important in a nice possible way. So with that, I'm going to propose the toast to 3 groups, because 3 is a lucky number. To the first group is to our families, however we want to define those people and animals that we get love from and give love to and hold us tight. The second group is to the creatures that made us want to get into this in the first place and that keep us in the profession. And then the last one is to each other. This profession is the greatest one in the entire world, and we need to and deserve to get everything we want to, but it's not going to get given to us, and so that's the whole point of tonight's conversation. So to the 3.
Cheers.
Oh, that is good apple juice.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Got to love it.
So, Brenda, I just roll into first points, right?
You just roll right on. Start the conversation, my dear.
So I think that the most salient point is that there is a huge unrealized revenue source in veterinary medicine that we, for I think all good reasons and well-intended reasons, are kind of leaving by the wayside. And by huge, I mean billions. My calculations put it at around 10 billion, but even if I'm wrong by a factor of 10, that's still a $1 billion opportunity, which kind of can get anybody in business, should get us excited. The biggest problem, of course, is that unrealized revenue also means that there are animals that are not getting their care. And the people who love them, whose human-animal bond is eroding because of it. So I'm going to actually start us off with a question and throw it out there. Is pet ownership something that should be limited by income? And if the answer is yes, by the way, then I'd just like to press a little bit more and say, is it something that should be limited by income that's present at the acquisition moment, or income over the lifetime, the 15 to 20 year lifetime that we have a pet?
So maybe a quick show of hands. Who believes that it should be limited by income? Anybody?
No one raising your hand.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Best statistics tell us that 72% of Americans live underneath the poverty line for at least 1 year during their lifetime. Just think about that for a second. And of course, when I read that, I was like, oh, that's way too much. And then I remembered vet school. And I was like, oh yeah, we were definitely under the poverty line for those 4 years, and actually the other 3 years that I was getting my PhD. So, and we had animals that whole time. Could we afford their care? Well, of course, our circumstance was blessed and different, but we know that there are a whole bunch of people out there, families, who consider the pet, 98% of pet owners consider their pet to be part of their family, but they're not able to access the kinds of things that veterinarians can give them. So, well, and then last point I guess I want to make before opening it up to another question is I think it's more than just the pets and the people that are suffering from this. I think it's us. I think it's the veterinarians who are also suffering from this, because we know that there's care that needs to be given. We even know that we could probably give it, but we don't have a business model that makes sense, because this isn't just about giving away more of our services. We are one of the most generous professions ever. And we can't do that. We just can't functionally continue to give away services. And so the question is, how can we create business models that do provide services to lower income families and still end up with a decent business model? So here's the next question for you to either ponder or throw into the chat or just speak up and say it. Can we think of any businesses that are out there that are doing good and doing well by offering services to families, let's say between $30,000 a year annual household income and $70,000 a year annual household income? Any companies that are doing pretty well?
Walmart.
Yes. Walmart's the best probably example, given that it's the largest market cap business in the world. Well, besides that.
Well, I know veterinarians who by intention serve that population. Mm-hmm. So they serve lower income people. They tailor the service to what the people can afford, but still try to maintain the pet's health. So I don't know that we need to look at other industries. It's happening within our own profession.
Oh, no question about it, Mike. No question about it. But there's still the latest statistics, and this is by both Packaged Facts, APPA, and the AVMA's studies, say about somewhere between 40 and 50% of pets, including dogs and cats primarily, aren't getting routine veterinary care. And so I think there's no question that there are people who are doing it. In fact, there's some pretty big businesses that are doing it. I'm just suggesting that we need a multitude of business models in order to make it functionally work for a number of the different communities that we need it.
So I can think of two potentially, and let's see if I'm doing this the right way, would be, I do think there are dentists that serve the lower communities, or they'll do the older community that are all on Medicare, et cetera. And then I'm also thinking about ophthalmologists with eyeglasses and making sure that young children have glasses, or that there are glasses made available. So, but am I doing that about right, or?
I think you're right, Catherine. They both do. There are both examples of companies that have made great work. I tend to steer away from the health professions, the human health professions, when I think about this, only because of the confounding factor of the third-party payment system. If I can go to maximize the Medicare, then I can probably make a business out of that.
That's true, yeah.
David, you can go to places like Payless Shoes, or the DSW Shoes, or any of those kinds of companies that they're not the $3,000 stiletto heels.
Well, even McDonald's is an example, right?
McDonald's is a great example.
Yeah.
I think Dollar General
is not healthy.
No.
Yeah, right.
Oh, but did you hear what Dollar General's now doing? $1 and $5 are now going to start, because they've been about the complaints of not having the fresh vegetables in the lower income markets, that they're now opening up produce in those stores.
And I think that that's exactly the kind of thing that we're seeing, Catherine. I think this is why this is really kind of an exciting. exciting conversation for us to have as a profession, because we're seeing across society, companies are realizing that they have the abilities to perform these things, and they're doing it in a way that actually makes money either for their shareholders or their executives. I can guarantee you that the executives at Dollar General are doing just fine. And it's not because they're predatory. It's not because they're making things bad for those people. They're actually providing, but they're providing it in a way that doesn't require, that substitutes volume for individual high tickets.
So Suzanne has herself on mute, but she said Planet Fitness, $10.
Good one too.
Everyone, yeah. So that's a subscription model, for instance, that allows you to pay in so much. It's not very much, but it gets you back the things that are minimal. So I also think that there's probably a good time in the conversation to bring up the idea that when we talk about most of the business models and use the round number of $200 per year that people say that across the lower income households, they claim that they can spend about $200 per year on their pets. Now, there are a couple points on that. One is, when they say that, the consensus is they really mean $200. They can't flux up, which is something we as a profession sometimes will do. You know, dental, it'll cost you $200 or maybe $350, depending on what I find.
I'm putting it on because it seems sketchy. I didn't know I could unmute myself.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. There you go.
There she is.
There you go, Suzanne. Thanks for joining.
And we don't even see the back of your sticky note. And then the second point, just to make it, is I think we need to focus initially on wellness care. I think it gets a really confusing conversation if we're also trying to squeeze in illness and trauma care into, but to be honest, if we could just say as a starting point, what we'd really like to do is give everybody wellness care, I'll take that.
Yeah. So tell me, David, is that, how does what Dr. Blackwell is doing at the University of Tennessee, how does that weigh into this kind of mindset? I know he talks an awful lot about it, and there's a lot of publicity and energy going into his particular program.
And not to mention $3.2 million from Maddie's fund.
That's a good money.
That's a good way to generate. I love Michael. I'm one of the presidents of his fan club. I think what Dr. Blackwell is doing with Align Care, the main difference between what he's talking about and the emphasis that I'd like us to think about is which vertical within those lower income, under-resourced communities are we talking about? So Michael is really talking about poverty level, at or around the poverty level or below it. And those households probably can't, I don't want to make judgments for anybody, but they probably don't have $200 of disposable income for their pets. And so what Michael is exploring is different models to serve as a philanthropic giving. And I think that that's really important. But I think if you focus on at or around the poverty level, it's going to be a lot harder nut to crack. And there's still a lot of animals that are in that, say, 30,000 to 70,000. Not to get into the weeds, but poverty level depends on where you are, and 30,000 baby poverty level in certain communities. But that next step within the community, that nobody's going to say it's easy to get on with $70,000 for a household of 4, but at least they have some disposable income to make decisions. Does that help?
I think that's a really good point. That's one of the reasons I was so excited to bring this topic, forward in the Bridge Club too, because someone may hear 70,000 and think that's a lot of money, right? But it's all relative to what you're spending on other things. So I think you bring up a really good point. Veterinarians deserve to make a good living. People with $30,000 also deserve to be able to take care of their pets. So I'm fascinated by some of the potential solutions, right, to bring those two pieces together.
Yeah. And to bring back to a point Mike made earlier, I want to make sure we don't forget that there are veterinarians serving those populations right now, and many of them are actually making quite a good living doing it. We've got examples like Gateway Animal Clinic in Cleveland that have they were grossing $4.2 million a year in a pretty hard section of Cleveland, most of their patients walking in. And by that, I meant they're like walking to the clinic. They don't have access to a vehicle. So however that works, he was able to create a model of care that was providing what patients could afford and what they needed, and making good revenues doing it, and was really considered to be a pillar of that community. So I think that there are ways to do it. I also think that a critical part of this is to meet people where they are. So one of the things that I say is pain control is sometimes fantastic medicine. Might be the only medicine we can give them because that's all that they can afford. Euthanasia is also good medicine because that may be the only thing that can be afforded. But the point is not could I do more, but I'm doing what I can, and they're doing what they can, and they automatically became great pet owners as soon as they brought their animal to a veterinarian or wanted to. And I think that's where, as a profession, we can do better in getting people excited and feeling good about themselves as pet owners, because that's the human-animal bond. Nobody wants to have a pet and feel like they're a bad pet owner. Sometimes we might unintentionally make them feel that way. So,
that's another excellent point, I think. You know, the degree to which we as a profession make a pet owner feel badly about the choice that they make, just because we may not agree with that particular choice. But I love that line. I mean, I love what you just said, that they automatically became great pet owners because they brought their pet into the veterinarian. How many people don't even do that?
Yeah.
well, we know.
Yeah.
we got pretty solid estimates about how many people don't end up into the vet.
Yeah.
David, this is Elise.
Hey, Elise.
I assume you know who Gatal Gawande is, right? The guy who wrote Checklist Manifesto. I have his name wrong on the first, but he wrote the Checklist Manifesto and also wrote the book Being Mortal.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've read that book.
I read it. Anybody who
Yeah.
hasn't read it, fantastic book.
I think it should be required reading for all of us in the healthcare professions at whatever level. But I think a lot of times when we keep talking about best medicine, it kind of falls into the realm of seeing how much money you can spend to keep the animal alive for us, kind of thing. But
Yeah, oh, no question, Elise. I think it's a really important point. Why do we feel bad? Or why does the pet owner feel bad when euthanasia is the only economical choice? And I think it's because we're now 3 or 4 generations into a third-party payment system for human healthcare that makes people believe that healthcare doesn't cost anything. And of course, I mean, we all know that's not true in veterinary medicine. It's actually just not true, full stop. 83% of Medicare costs get paid out in the last 4 months of people's lives.
Wow.
I'll just say that again. 83% of Medicare costs get paid out in the last 4 months of people's lives. I mean, that's our children's Medicare that's getting spent. And it's, you know, I understand that those are really hard philosophical questions to talk about. But in our profession, one of the greatest gifts I think we have as a profession is the ability to face death and to accept death as a natural part of living. And I don't want to get off, and I mean, we're still talking about access to care, but I think a critical piece of access to care is the acceptance that you're a great pet owner and we are a great pet community, this veterinary client pet relationship, because we're able to provide the things which are economically reasonable to provide. And I think that's a really tough one for especially younger veterinarians in our profession. But, you know, I don't know if anybody here was associated. Maybe Carrie, you may have been in the NAVMEC meetings back in the early 2000s, where the North American Veterinary Medical Education Consortium. We had a guest speaker there who was the head of all medical licensing in the United States, talking about the differences between veterinary profession and MDs. And he made a plea during his conversation. He said, please don't shorten the veterinary education program. veterinarians see death in a more intimate and immediate way than any human physician ever does. And to put that in the face of younger veterinarians, younger human beings, just it's you're making that so much harder. So anyway, I'll step off the soapbox for that one just a second. Yep.
Well, that's another bridge discussion.
Yeah.
That's an excellent one. You're right, Elise. That's a really, really good one. You know,
Brenda, you knew this was going to spin off a few more.
No, exactly. David and I talked about this yesterday. We were like, okay, this could easily go down so many different pathways, right? But that's part of what is so fascinating about the crux of this conversation. You could have 16 different conversations that are centered on access to care that go a million different directions. But
and I can tell you, I'm talking to Ted next week, so we'll just add that to the list.
Yeah, there's some really good ones. But you know, I'm going to pull it back to something that I find really interesting too. And David, this kind of harkens back to a conversation we were having at VMX when you were talking about that hospital in Cleveland, right? So how do you evaluate when a community that is a low-income community is a good opportunity for a veterinary practice? And I don't want to make this about finances because that's really not what it's about, but you need to be sustainable.
But I think, you know, so full disclosure, I'm the child of two economics professors. So in our world, they're completely interrelated. You can't have a viable business without having a viable business, and you can't do good unless you have a viable business. So with that said, I think the danger with this conversation oftentimes comes in one of two things. People will say, well, yeah, we agree that that's a problem, but it's so complicated that there's no way we can categorize this. And the other side says, yeah, we agree that that's a problem. We just need more mobile clinics. Or we need more free spay and neuter programs being paid for by philanthropy. Or we need the shelters to be able to step up and provide access for those. The answer isn't, I think, so simple. I think that but it's also can't be so complex that we just shrug our shoulders and say, I guess there's no way. What I would love to come up with is sort of an idea of a definable set of parameters that you can look at any community and say, how should I be able to enter and succeed into this market? Mm-hmm. The first, and just to take a stab at it, and I would love input, I would love discussions offline or online. First and foremost, it's population density, which, by the way, you can get from the US Census Bureau. And so we can assume that a certain percentage of all households have pets. The ABMA surveys are very good at this. They separate it out by all sorts of demographics, by race, by age, by gender. And got it. But so subtle. So population density is probably the first one. I would say the second one is where do you put in? How do you enter into this space? And so I would argue that how central a community is really important. So there are inner city communities where a single storefront would do just fine. And a mobile clinic is useless because you just end up parking it in the same parking lot all the time. On the other hand, there are rural communities where it has to be a mobile unit because the population density isn't high enough and people aren't used to coming to one place. Or on the other hand, you could also have a rural community where everyone's coming to the Dollar General at least once a week. And so putting a clinic with the Dollar General may be exactly the right answer. So those are the first two, population density and how used to is a community to come in. And then the third factor for my head is how do you enter in? Do you put flyers up everywhere, meaning that there's very little social bonding capital? Or do you have to talk to one pastor? You talk to that one pastor, he knows you're there. The next thing you know, you're going to have a full waiting room. So those are the three ways that I kind of think about communities. I'm sure there are a bunch of other ones, but the first one is US Census Bureau. The second two, you just have to go into the community and hang out for a little while and try to figure out how that community works. The last thing I want to say, and I think this is also a critical step for our profession regardless, is we need people who understand those communities to help us with this. Yes, that means increasing the diversity of our profession, which is obviously an ongoing and very important thing. But I think it also, maybe even more importantly, and certainly more immediately, we need to increase the diversity within our community, within our paraprofessional staff and our employees. Yeah. Get some folks from a neighborhood so that they can help you understand how that neighborhood works, and then listen to them. So kids, every kid wants to be a vet. That's what we got going for us.
That's a really good point. So we are at our 25 minutes. We always promise that we're going to keep our conversations down to 25 minutes. So if anybody has to depart, you may certainly do so. However, those of you who attend the Bridge Club rarely know we always do an after party, because no good dinner party ever
fill up your glasses.
Exactly. No good dinner party ever ends at the allotted time. So we invite everybody to stay around. I know David's got a few more minutes that he's willing to spend with us. So please feel free to stay around and continue the conversation, because it is definitely an intriguing one.
So I will jump in really quick on the diversity conversation. The Bridge Club is going to be having a 2-part series coming up, starting, Brenda doesn't know this yet, but I think we're going to do one in June now. That just came up today. But we are going to also be having one in September. But we are definitely going to be addressing on that topic overall. So if there's other points people want to see us add into that conversation, I think access to care and what David is bringing up is a huge piece to why diversity is needed. So just letting you all know that's coming.
Also, I forgot to mention when you brought up Michael and the line care, there is a conference that's being held at the University of Tennessee that I'm going to be helping in a small amount to facilitate one of the outbreaks, one of the breakout sessions. It's June 28th and 29th. And it's on Align Care. How are we getting that? If you want to learn, it's 2 more days of full-on learning.
Wow, that's cool.
Do you think telehealth will have a role in this at all? I mean,
Yes.
It seems to me that makes sense, that in some cases it could be beneficial, especially in areas that was Barnabas, and especially in areas that, you know, maybe not have access.
I think human medicine has shown time and again that well-executed telehealth is an extraordinary amplifier for veterinarians. And I think Pat, I think that's the key thing, is you can make a good living. You can't make a good living if you're giving every client 45 minutes of your time. You know, veterinarians are the one limiting reagent to our throughput. And it's not as though we don't have more pets out there that need care. So if somehow anything that we can do to make veterinarian time more efficiently used is, I think, a really important thing. And that also, at the same time, we can raise the quality of care with telehealth. You know, no one should have to put their cat into another box to come back in for a routine surgery check. You know, if you have to do something, okay, but really just to put hands on their cat, boy, that's tough on the cat, it's tough on the owner, it's tough on the human-animal bond.
So you mentioned that your parents were economists, and so it seems to me that if you're going to make this practice viable, low cost, you're going to have high volume.
Mm-hmm.
And
Probably.
So high volume you can do if you have a central settings, you know, you can get people coming in and all that. From a mobile standpoint, that seems that it's almost contradictory. It's hard to get high volume when you're having to go from one place to another. So from a practice model, what do you think that looks like if you really are trying to deliver care to underserved or low income areas?
So Mike, I love the cat. I think that's a really great question, and it's probably one I'm not smart enough to answer, because I think it's going to be different in almost every community. I'm not bailing out of the question, so I'm happy to try to address it.
But what are some key things, if I wanted to do this practice, what do I need to know from a business standpoint to make it financially viable?
First of all, I think you need to understand what your costs are. Yes, mobile practices are tougher to bring in lots of revenue, but their overhead costs are a fraction of what brick and mortar costs are. They're also their ability to do things. I mean, hard to do spay and neuter when you're in a mobile practice unless you've got the whole rig built out. there is also drive time. So a point technology can really help you. I don't know if you've seen some of the sales call GPS mapping software, but it can tell you exactly where you need to be most efficient through the course of your day. So that really saves on the back and forth stuff that, you know, back when I graduated from vet school, we were still struggling with. And then I think the real question is about a pricing model. So just as an example, when most furniture stores build something new, they say to themselves, hey, how much should we pay for this? How much should we charge for this? So they do their cost of goods, they multiply it to a good margin, and then they sell it for that. Well, IKEA has flipped that pricing model on its head. What they've said is, we think that our customer can afford a $49 end table. So how can, for a 20% margin, we still make a $49 end table? So maybe the question is, I think my customers, my patients, my parents, the pet parents can afford $100 for their routine wellness visit, or $20 a month to be on there. How can I structure my offerings to be able to give me a good return with that, without being predatory, you know, and feeling good about it?
Well, I think that brings up an interesting point too, because what's a good, you know, margin, right? I mean, there might be there. I mean, we've all met veterinary professionals who are willing to do more with less, I guess, or accept a smaller margin or a smaller income because it feels right for them to be doing what they're doing. I think that's an interesting part of the discussion. Yet another part of this interesting discussion that we're having here.
But I think it's really important for us to continue to be creative about ways to answer Mike's question in a practice-specific way. So for one community, it may be that I need to have a full business book or I'm not going to be there. Another community, it may be that I've got 4 storefronts and I only go there because because rents are really cheap, but I've got a veterinary nurse there all the time, and I show up just for 3-hour blocks 4 times a week, so I can shuffle myself to make it most efficient for me. And I'm still seeing 5 minutes per patient, about the amount of time that I ever see my dentist on a given year. But I'm leveraging my space, and the pet, most importantly, the pet is getting great care, and I'm able to make a good living. So I want us to try to, the last resort is for veterinarians to make less money. I think that's.
So David, we had a really interesting conversation at Veterinary Innovation Summit about the different models you could apply. Like, we keep applying this independent practice model. We have to do everything ourselves. So I blew it up and said, let's imagine no practice. There's no practice. And let's imagine maybe that we're like Uber or we're like Airbnb, and we operate our business differently. So if you operated like Uber, we need to be independent, right. But obviously we have to have a hub and spoke. We have to have a place that they can go for surgery, whether we do it or we're mentored by a board certified surgeon. We have to have a place where we can take, rent a mobile van for the day. We have to have a place we can do telehealth. But we control it if there are members. So those people have chosen us to be their veterinarian, and we orchestrate it with others. I think we haven't thought kind of bigger. We keep thinking of the independent practice, but if we all can figure out how to work together, the access to care and the expansion of our profession will be amazing. We have some great transcripts from what the groups thought, breakout groups thought about how to design a practice like Apple, Google, Uber. It was really fun and enlightening.
I know people enjoyed that call, that conversation, Carrie. Is there a link to that transcript?
We just finished transcribing it, so just send me an email and I'll get it out to you.
Oh,
but I think we'll put it up. We'll put it up on this, and sure, if Bruce hasn't already done that, we'll make sure that that's accessible to everybody there.
Catherine was in that breakout, and she said it was a blast. I was moderating in the room next door, by the way, and you guys sound like you were having way more fun than we were. So, good job, Sherry.
They started out quiet
Oh.
and then they got really, noisy.
So one of the things about innovation, because I did some training, I was a trainer of that in my former corporate life, is really base it on what the user wants and how the user, so how people with certain economic means, how do they find healthcare for their pet? What do they do? Maybe they just go to Walmart and buy some stuff that they find. So I would just say that one thing we should be mindful of is, rather than the profession trying to figure out what that should look like and be a different model, but another one we impose on pet owners, I think the idea of using empathy and really, seeing how they are taking care of their pets now and what they're doing would be a great way to start that kind of thing, because that's going to tell you what people will do as opposed to what we think they might do. Just passing that along.
I think it's a great point, Mike. And I would also say we could start by not shaming each other. I'll call out names because I know some good people on that. But to sneer at somebody because they're a Banfield vet or a VIP pet care vet, boy, no, we need to stop that, because those are two very important practice models that are filling a great need. And by the way, they're also filling professions' need for flexible schedules and benefits for people who might not want to be working 70 hours a week, putting in their time. So I think that's an excellent.
And Walmart is opening up practice,
right?
Walmart's also opening up practices.
Yeah.
They've got some in Oklahoma now, and I haven't been following that, so I don't know what their offer is. But somebody's going to come up with an offer that people will use because that fits their needs.
Well, and Suzanne has posted in the chat a couple of really good thoughts too here. For example,
we have one in Tampa that's associated
with the Walmart, at least.
Yeah, we've got one in Tampa, but the interesting thing is we're talking about this is I have a lot of clinics that Strategic Works consults with, and it's interesting, consistently the most profitable are the ones that service that vanishing middle class. And basically the veterinarians have gone into communities that it's not that hard to find a middle class neighborhood. We're not talking poverty, and I know we can argue all day long what poverty means, but it's people where it's communities where you've got two people that generally have service-related, I live in Florida, service-related jobs. They're making a decent living, but I wouldn't want to support two kids and a husband on a $70,000 W-2. And the models that these guys are using in their clinics tend to be, and I am not a veterinarian, all I know is that it tends to work because they stack, and as Dave said, they're because they are that, but they're not every visit with $500 worth of diagnostics.
Right.
And, they're not doing everything that we call good medicine, because and like I said, I'm not a vet. All I know that I get told that in school somewhere you get told that 80% of the animals get better no matter what you do. And I'm not suggesting we do low quality care, but they're providing acceptable quality care that loves their animals. And the death rates and bad medicine outcomes don't seem to be any worse in those clinics than the quote unquote high quality medicine, where nobody walks out with an invoice close $1,000. There's a lot less time spent on arguing how it's can't pay, and writing off accounts receivable, and all of that kind of stuff, because they're servicing the needs of their clients, and they're doing quite well.
And that's, I think, an excellent point.
And I think that's the practice model that I would suggest is each of those clients of yours have cracked the nut. Suzanne, you brought up the question around incremental care. That is one of the breakouts that we're going to have at the Aligned Care Summit in June, is to talk about how do we do that. You know, I come from the animal most recently from the animal welfare world, where I was president of PetSmart Charities. And I can tell you right now, 100,000 dogs in shelters are getting killed because of heartworm. They're heartworm positive. And they're not clinical, but they're heartworm positive. Therefore, they can't be shipped out of heartworm endemic areas to places that don't have heartworm. So unless they get treated, and the treatment costs $1,000. And it feels to me that there's something wrong. It doesn't cost $1,000, by the way, because the emiticide costs $1,000. It costs $1,000 for the supportive care that they have to keep in cages, et cetera, the heartworm. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, and I think that if you can afford it, you should do all those things. But in many cases, we're trading a probability of morbidity or death for the certainty of morbidity or death. And that's a bigger conversation to have around heartworm. But my point is only because in heartworm, we've gone to gold standard only. It's the only acceptable way to handle heartworms. Whereas what we really can do is drop it down. And then the last thing I would say is young veterinarians today are told basically that the most important diagnostic tools that they have come back on pieces of paper or computer screens, as opposed to the ones at the ends of their fingers, their eyes, their nose, their ears. So just another soapbox.
Oh, that's
So
of us on it.
I heard, I read something interesting. Jamie Dimon, who's, CEO of JP Morgan, in his annual letter said that, and I guess they have this data, that 40% of workers in America make $15 an hour or less. So back to the comment that was made about the shrinking middle class, I think that's something that there needs to be even a paradigm change within veterinary schools and talking about practice management and all of that, because if everybody's fighting for that shrinking pie, there's going to be more of like what we heard about in Texas, right? Veterinarians wanting to, because they don't like the competition. But the reality is that there is, this change in economic purchasing power within the country. Yeah, more people are working than ever, but they're working for less, and they're going to have families and they're going to have pets, and how to successfully deliver care for those animals and, the families' love of the animal is going to be one of the more crucial things we face as a profession, I think.
And let's not fool ourselves as a profession. They're going to find care. They might not find it with veterinarians. They're going to find it because that's one of those truisms around the market. If somebody needs something and they can't get it from a certain group, they're going to get it elsewhere. And that might be their groomer or their trainer or their friend or their internet, but they're going to find it. And I think one of the things for us is shame on us if we lose that opportunity to be able to get remain the center part of that conversation. And there's no reason we can't except our own fear. And by the way, if there was a national association of mom and pop hardware stores, they would not have been able to stop Lowe's and Home Depot either. So right now, we, even with the movement of consolidation within the veterinary profession, we still have 80%, 75% of veterinary clinics are independent operators. So, our work is cut out for us because getting a group of a disaggregated profession moving in the same direction is a really tough thing. But how it starts is conversations like this one, like tonight.
Well,
Absolutely.
and I'd like to, I know we're getting close to the end here, is how you started this. So it's not about the competition to go after this market, because they're not going after it. You said 10 billion, but you said conservatively $1 billion. There were practices all over the country that are seeking to grow revenue. And so I feel like there's an opportunity here. You just can't use your current model. You can't expect give the same model to this audience of people and expect the same result. In fact, you're probably going to turn them off. So I think that's if there were to be a lesson learned in all of this, as we do move forward. So before we start to wrap up, does anyone have any additional questions? I want to make sure, am I wrapping up too quick there, Brenda? Sorry about that if I was looking at it.
No, that's fine. I was just going to ask if anybody had any final questions, and then give David an opportunity to give his final thoughts on, again, what could be a many hours running conversation, but we want to let everybody get off to dinner and their evening plans.
Nobody's sitting next to me at a bar, or it will be a long running.
So Carrie's involved in the schools. I don't know who Carrie is. Is she involved in the, pardon me?
Carrie Marshall?
Yeah.
We're all peripherally conversations with deans and the AAVMC. Please.
Okay, because I'm starting to hear, and I don't know if it's true or not, that some of the schools are starting to train the students a little bit differently in terms of things like emotional intelligence rather than just IQ kind of things. And maybe we will get away what we've had up to now of people not being able to talk even for 5 minutes, and just having, I'm seeing, not just hearing, strange things coming out of the new graduates in some of the hospitals where we've hired them. I don't need to see the PET. All I need to see is the reports. The clients don't understand that I'm the doctor and they're the peon that just does what I tell them. And I thought that went out years ago, but apparently it's still kind of around. And I'm just curious if the schools really are starting to look a little differently at how we're training the doctors that are coming out of these schools.
No question, the schools are they, I mean, there's huge revolution happening in the way veterinarians are being trained. Probably not fast enough for any of us because faculty, they're tenured, you can't fire them, so they stay around for a long time. But there are, I can guarantee you, at almost all of the schools in the United States, there is deep interest in understanding how do we communicate, how do we get practice ready, how do we not have 30% of the graduates think that they have to go into internships. So there is a lot of work, but I would actually caution us because it's always easy to go back to the schools and say, hey, this is your problem to deal with.
No, I know.
It's not, it's our problem to deal with. But yeah,
that's why the consultants stay around, David.
So one of the best examples of what is happening in a school, I think, is up at Calgary, and Susan Kutz is part of the professional skills curriculum there. She takes students up to the Northwest Territories, villages up, near the Arctic Circle.
That must be interesting.
First Nations.
And it's interesting because during this professional skills class, she said that the students complain that this isn't relevant, all the emotional intelligence thing, empathy, blah, blah, blah. They get up there and they have to use it because they're in an environment they never even imagined providing healthcare to animals in these villages. And they come away saying it's the best experience we've ever had. Yeah. And the professional skills curriculum absolutely does prepare them for that. So if you're interested in what that might look like, you might want to look into what they're doing in Calgary.
Okay, thank you.
Colorado State has a very similar program. So does UC Davis, and I'm sure that there are a number of schools that we could talk about going out to Native American or in Canada First Nation communities. But Ohio State's got this fabulous community practice that goes out into people's homes who can't afford veterinary care and have the students provide it. And just the language and the communication skills that are required to realize there's no way at least they could say, hey, you guys are just the peons. Parents are the only form of care. We are at best consultants and interveners at critical moments.
Excellent point. Excellent. Okay, so we are at 7:48, and
right.
Selfishly would love to continue this conversation, but we do make a promise.
We
so,
do.
Okay.
David, parting thoughts for our group who's gathered here, and thank you to everyone who has been here tonight.
And for our first timers, we love it.
Yeah.
I
So if you
think
love what you hear, join the Bridge Club.
Yeah, please join the Bridge Club. And so I think this is this has been a great, fun conversation. Thank you all for giving us this time. I like to say that in life we have three sorts of resources: our time, our talents, and our treasure. And talents you can get more of, treasure you can always make more of, but you can't get any time back. So I think it's actually the most precious resource. And so thank you sincerely for being part of this. And thanks for caring about the profession. When I was just graduating, I used to always hear, every time you talk to somebody, they go, "Oh, you're a veterinarian. My kid wants to be a veterinarian." I will tell you that I've heard that change. I've now heard, "Oh, you're a veterinarian. You have no idea what my vet wanted to charge me for the simple blah, blah." And that to me means that we're missing something. That tone change is important. And so anecdotes and N of one, but I think that it's important for us to pay attention to this stuff because people aren't getting what they feel they need from us. So with that, let's all proselytize a little bit together about this. I don't think it's up on to any of us, but I do think it's up to all of us to make that change.
Awesome. All right, everyone, party toast. Thank you so much to everyone and have a great evening. Cheers.
Great evening.
Good night, everybody.
Brenda,
Thank you so
Catherine,
much.
thanks for the topic.